The World Cup is happening right now, and it feels gigantic, like the whole planet is watching at once. And I just realized something. This tournament is almost 100 years old. It has a massive history. People talk about Pele, Maradona, Messi, like they are gods. I only half know who they are. There are legendary teams, famous miracles, heartbreaks I have never even heard of. If I am going to be a real fan, I want to know the whole story from the very beginning. So take me back to the start. How did the World Cup become the biggest event on Earth? I would love to. Grab a seat because this is one of the greatest stories in all of sports. I will take you through the entire history of the World Cup, decade by decade. The birth, the legends, the dynasties, the miracles, and the heartbreaks, all explained simply. By the end, you will understand the giants whose shoulders the players of 2026 are standing on. Let us go back to 1930. Our story begins in 1930 in a world with no televisions in the home and no internet. A Frenchman named Jules Rimet had a dream, a single tournament to crown the best nation on earth. The very first World Cup was held in a small but soccer-mad country, Uruguay. Only 13 teams came. Some European sides took weeks on a boat just to get there. And the hosts, Uruguay, won that first tournament, becoming the first world champions in history. The trophy was named after Jules Rimet himself, the man who made it all happen. Through the 1930s, the sport grew fast and a new power rose in Europe. Italy won back-to-back titles in 1934 and 1938, the first true World Cup dynasty, but then the world changed. The Second World War stopped everything, and there was no World Cup for 12 long years. When the tournament finally returned in 1950, it went to the country that breathes soccer, Brazil. Brazil built a giant new stadium, the Maracanã, and packed nearly 200,000 fans inside for the final. They only needed a draw against little Uruguay to be champions. The party was already planned, but Uruguay shocked them, winning 2-1 and silencing that enormous crowd. Brazilians still call it the Maracanazo, a heartbreak so deep it became part of the nation's story. That same tournament, by the way, is when the United States pulled off its famous upset over England. 4 years later, in 1954, came the Miracle of Bern, where West Germany beat the brilliant Hungarians. Hungary had not lost in years and were the best team in the world. The shock stunned everyone. But the greatest story of the 1950s was just beginning with a 17-year-old boy from Brazil. In 1958 in Sweden, a teenager named Pele burst onto the world stage. He was only 17, but he played like nothing anyone had ever seen, scoring in the final. Brazil won their first World Cup, and a global superstar was born. Pele combined speed, power, and impossible skill. Many still call him the greatest of all time. 4 years later, in 1962, Brazil did it again and won back-to-back titles. Then came 1966 in England, and the hosts had their finest hour. England won their only World Cup ever on home soil in a dramatic and controversial final. But the team everyone remembers is the Brazil side of 1970 in Mexico. With Pele at his peak, that team is often called the greatest single team ever assembled. They played a beautiful flowing style and brushed teams aside on the way to the trophy. It was also the first World Cup shown around the world in color, and the colors were Brazilian gold and blue. Pele finished with 3 World Cup titles, a record no player has ever matched. A true king. As the 1970s arrived, a new idea swept the sport from the Netherlands. It was called total football, where every player could attack, defend, and swap positions at will. Its genius was a graceful Dutchman named Johan Cruyff, a player ahead of his time. His Netherlands dazzled the world in 1974, but lost the final to host West Germany. It is one of the great what-ifs of history. The most beautiful team did not win. West Germany, led by the elegant Franz Beckenbauer, were ruthless winners. In 1978, Argentina won their first title at home in a wall of noise and confetti. And in 1982, Italy rose again, powered by the goals of Paolo Rossi to win their third title. The game was growing bigger, faster, and more global with every tournament, but the 1980s belonged to one unforgettable, magical, controversial man. His name was Diego Maradona, a small, stocky genius from Argentina. In 1986 in Mexico, he produced the most famous few minutes in World Cup history. In one game against England, he scored 2 goals that the world will never forget. The first he punched in illegally with his hand, then cheekily called it the hand of God. The second, he dribbled past half the England team alone in what is called the goal of the century. One goal was a scandal, the other was a masterpiece. Together, they made him a legend. Maradona dragged Argentina to the title almost single-handedly. It was his tournament. He returned in 1990 and reached the final again. But this time, West Germany got their revenge. Maradona and Pele would argue forever Over who was truly the greatest, the debate never ends. In 1994, the World Cup came to a brand new frontier, the United States. Many doubted America cared about soccer, but the stadiums were packed all summer long. The final was tense and goalless, and for the first time ever, decided by a penalty shootout, Brazil beat Italy after the Italian star Roberto Baggio skied his penalty over the bar. Pure heartbreak. In 1998, France hosted and a new hero emerged, the brilliant Zinedine Zidane. Zidane scored twice in the final as France won their first ever World Cup, and a nation erupted. Then in 2002, the tournament went to Asia for the first time, in Korea and Japan. There, a Brazilian striker called Ronaldo completed an incredible comeback from career-threatening injury. He scored both goals in the final. And Brazil won a record 5th World Cup. No nation has more. 4 years later, in 2006, Zidane led France back to the final one last time, but his career ended in shock when he headbutted an opponent and was sent off in his final game. Italy won that night, claiming their 4th title, and Zidane walked away a fallen hero. The game now had global superstars, billion-dollar audiences, and drama at every turn. In 2010, the World Cup made history again, hosted for the first time on the African continent in South Africa. To the sound of buzzing vuvuzela horns, Spain won their first ever title. They played a mesmerizing passing style nicknamed tiki-taka, keeping the ball until rivals broke. Then came 2014 back in Brazil, and a night Brazilians will never forget for the wrong reasons. In the semifinal, Germany humiliated the hosts 7-1. It was so shocking it earned its own name, the Minerazo, a national wound. Germany went on to win their 4th title, sealing it with a brilliant goal in the final. And in 2018 in Russia, a teenage rocket named Kylian Mbappe announced himself to the world. He was the first teenager since Pele to score in a World Cup final. France won their 2nd title, blending pace, power, and youth into a powerhouse. But the greatest story of all was still waiting for one man 4 years later. For 2 decades, the world had watched Lionel Messi, perhaps the most gifted player ever. He had won everything in club soccer, but the one prize that escaped him was the World Cup. In 2022 in Qatar, in what many call the greatest final ever played, he chased his dream. Argentina faced France and Mbappe in a match that swung back and forth like a heavyweight fight. The game ended in a draw after extra time, 3 goals each, and went to a penalty shootout. Argentina held their nerve, and Lionel Messi finally lifted the World Cup. His story was complete. Grown fans wept. It was the perfect ending to the career of one of the all-time greats. And it proved that the World Cup is still the one stage where legends are truly made. So after almost 100 years, who sits at the top of history? Brazil leads them all with 5 titles, the most successful nation the World Cup has ever seen. Germany and Italy follow with 4 each, the proud powerhouses of Europe. Argentina now has 3, with Uruguay and France on 2 apiece. Only 8 different nations have ever won it. Joining that list is the dream of every country. To win, a team needs talent, luck, heart, and one unforgettable run. It is the hardest prize in sports, which brings us right back to today and the biggest World Cup in history. For the first time ever, 48 teams are competing across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Somewhere in this tournament, the next chapter of this story is being written right now. A new legend will rise, a new miracle will happen, a new heartbreak will sting, and maybe, just maybe, a country that has never won before will lift that famous trophy. You started knowing only that it was big. Now you know the legends, the dynasties, and the whole story behind it. Kneel to hero. Every player on the field in 2026 grew up dreaming of joining this history. And now when you hear the names Pele, Maradona, or Messi, you will know exactly why they matter. You're not just watching a tournament anymore. You're watching the latest chapter of a 100-year story. Subscribe to Kneel to Hero, where we turn total beginners into real fans, one story at a time. New video every week. Tell me in the comments, who do you think is the greatest of all time? I will read every one.